I apologize for our late start. I didn't realize that the location had been changed, so I went up to the Bay's attic. But I think that we've been moved for audience size reasons, and I think that was the correct choice. I think it would have been difficult to fit you all in the attic. But yes, so as an introduction, my name is Rachel Wallis, and this is my husband, Jonathan Wallis. And suppose my autistic special interest is reprotech and Superbabies. And I think that as a group, how many of you guys have read Gene Smith's article on Less Wrong about Superbabies? Okay, so about half. Has anyone read Zvi's stuff on reprotech and the sort of path forward? Yes, okay, less people. In that case, we should probably just do a brief overview, which is that recent advances in sort of statistical genetics and in the price of sequencing has come down, basically mean that we are now able to potentially make decisions about the genes of our children in ways that were not available to humans before us. And this, I think, is probably a good idea given that AGI is on the horizon, and it seems to me that one of the better paths forward would be to accelerate human superintelligence in order to compete with machines. And look, a lot of people say that the timelines are probably not going to match up. It seems like we might be in a sort of a fast takeoff, and children do take a while to grow up, but I think it's probably one of the better paths forward. So basically, there are a bunch of different ways that we could alter the genomes of future humans. The one that's currently available is polygenic embryo selection. So this is basically where you go through regular rounds of IVF. You take eggs and sperm and you put them together and you create a bunch of embryos. You take a sample of the trophectoderm, which contains a couple of cells. You spin those cells up to amplify them, look at the DNA, and make predictions about the child's future health, intelligence, cancer propensity, and then select the best one for implantation. And so any of you could do this tomorrow if you wanted to. We've recently gone through this process, and so we're 6 weeks pregnant with our first child, which is very exciting. Thank you. Although it is... Oh, yeah.
How many of you saw Gene Smith's tweet about showing a bunch of embryos on a curve? Okay, just a few of you. Oh, wait, yeah, it went viral. I was like, you're all on Twitter. Where are the hands? So the very far out embryo that you all saw is in the room with you here today. Yeah.
And so that's pretty exciting, but the selection power of having, we were lucky enough to have 50 embryos, which is quite a lot. We had to go through 4 rounds of IVF to get that many. And I am blessed with polycystic ovaries, and so they're more amenable to that process than most ovaries. So it would be great to have other methods which are a little bit less hard on the woman involved. And so a couple of these methods that are coming up in the pipeline is there's something called IVG, which is where you take maybe a skin cell, you turn it into a stem cell, and then turn the stem cell into gametes, so either eggs or sperm. And the way that this would sort of accelerate things is that the major bottleneck for polygenic embryo selection is being able to produce eggs. As the large gamete, they're more difficult to produce. And so if you could instead do selection for, 1,000 embryos as opposed to 50 embryos, you would get more selection, although not that much more, unfortunately.
And this might be particularly relevant if you are very worried about AI and want humans to stay relevant for maybe an extended period of time. If you can do IVG, that also means you can functionally skip generations because you could generate gametes from the embryos. So you could do sort of directed evolution by creating some embryos, sequencing them, taking cells from the ones that have the most of the traits that you want from what you've gotten out of their sequence, and then having those have eggs and stem cells. So, like, in theory, if you had this process working, you could do hundreds or thousands of human generations in like a very compressed period of time.
So that would be pretty cool. Another one is straight up germline engineering, which is technically not illegal, I believe, but there are certain issues in place in that you can't get any federal funding for it, and you're also not allowed to offer it as a commercial product. So that means that there's not really any money in it, for obvious reasons. I don't know if you guys have seen, there was a recent article from a lab at Columbia who said that it seems more easier than they originally thought. And there are a couple of companies, I think Sam Altman is invested in one, that are sort of attempting to make it possible. But that one, for regulatory reasons and for good scientific reasons, probably is at least 10 years away. What are the other methods? There's another thing that's coming up is, so there is currently something that you can do for fertility preservation, which is sometimes offered to cancer patients, which is taking out part of your ovary and freezing it, and then you go through cancer treatment, and then you implant the ovary later to preserve fertility. And some of the doctors who have been doing this procedure have found that they've been actually able to culture this piece of ovarian tissue in a petri dish to produce eggs. And so this is extremely new, basically has only happened in the last year, but it means that women would probably be able to avoid IVF altogether by just taking out a piece of the ovary and turning it into a little factory. So that's another potential avenue. But I think the main bottlenecks in all of this is, that each one of these different scenarios has its own technical bottlenecks, but all of them kind of depend on our predictors being reasonably good. So they're not, unfortunately, currently not that great. Some conditions that are way more heritable and reasonably simplistic are something like schizophrenia. The predictors for it are actually really, really good. And so if you're somebody with a family history of schizophrenia, polygenic embryo selection could be amazing for you and your family. But other attributes that we think of that we value, something like intelligence, I think that the best company that has the best predictors is Heresight, and I think that their predictor only explains something like 20% of the observed variance, which is it's just not that great yet. And so I think, unfortunately, a big bottleneck is doing the hard work of going out into the world and just getting better data. So we need more matched genome phenotype sets that you can then train predictors on to be able to make better predictions. There are quite a few actual sets that do exist, which are pretty good, but they're kind of siloed all over the world, and it's very hard to get access to them. So there is something called the Million Veterans Project, which is, as it sounds like, is the sequenced genomes of 1 million veterans, as well as long-term health data, actually unusually high-quality health data, as well as the military, I think, does IQ tests. That one would be rocket fuel to the industry if it were made available. It also has things which I think would be, currently we don't have a polygenic embryo predictor for something like courage. And if you had access to this data set, you could potentially do a predictor on who has had a medal of valor, which I think, I think I would like to have courageous children. I think that'd be awesome. But yeah, that's a swift overview. I'm sorry I'm a bit scatterbrained at the moment, in the first trimester, and I'm feeling quite tired. But so I think I'll go over to just various questions. Yes.
You said you did 4 rounds of IVF, which seems very difficult. As someone who, I have a wife and we're considering doing this, do you have any advice, or I'm kind of curious how you went through, that to me is the biggest hurdle of everything.
Yeah, I did 7 rounds recently, only 4 of which where we did embryo creation, and then the other 3 were just to bank eggs in case embryo editing becomes available in the next 10 years, and so I wanted to have eggs as well. And so I am an IVF veteran at this point. And I'm actually about to publish an article on Less Wrong, sort of going through each of the cycles and saying things that helped. I spent a lot of time trying to biohack it to get better results. I think my one major thing that I would say is GLP-1s are your friend. They are incredible. And so IVF is a highly, highly inflammatory process, and especially if you're doing multiple rounds. And women report this, you feel tired and you gain weight, and it can cause weird metabolic stuff. And it seems like GLP-1s basically just like counteract all of that. And so I actually felt like quite good doing my IVF cycles, and I put that down mostly to retatrutide.
Yeah, I think that it's both the case that Rachel is unusually robust and also just very motivated to be the queen of the super babies, and also like a good responder. At the same time, IVF is like a very, 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 very under-optimized process because they figured out all their basic protocols for what they were doing in the 80s, 90s, and have not updated seriously since then in a lot of ways. Rachel very much needs to finish her article. Who here would read the IVF optimization article? Okay, Rachel knows about as much as anyone about this process and is suffering from acrasia. So I'm going to have you all write the article in unison to try and cause this to actually happen because lots of women need this advice. All right, are you guys ready? 3, 2, 1. Very good. Thank you.
All right, other questions? So we went to, I did a lot of research on different clinics and like who has the best overall success rates. And in the end, I just decided to go with CNY Fertility, who are by far the cheapest clinic. You can do a round of egg freezing for like $5,000. I think embryo making's a bit more, maybe like $8,000. But basically I'm like, in the end, I did like the EV calculation and I was like, okay, maybe I get like 10% less eggs by going here compared to like a really famous fertility doctor like Dr. Amy is in the Bay Area. Many of you might have heard of her. She's amazing. But it was made more sense to just do another round of IVF and also to try and biohack your own like stuff as much as you can. But I would recommend them. They're good.
What about the political resistance?
Yeah, I think that this is it's in an unfortunate position where both there are principled objections from both the left and the right, and everyone has different objections. And so, like, one of my favorite things to do is to go around and talk to people and be like, this is something I'm really excited about. I think it could make the world a much better place. And like, so many people have different objections. And so I know that various evangelical people I've talked to are obviously concerned about the fact that you're creating excess embryos. Although, interestingly enough, it turns out that the demand for embryos is actually way higher than the supply. There are a lot of people in the world who perhaps both mum and dad have infertility issues, and so there are a lot of couples who are actually looking for embryos to be donated. And so my husband and I, we're going to use as many of our embryos as we can and then probably donate the rest. And so that's like one way to get around that objection, although I've talked to Catholic people, and I think for them it's less that you're creating excess embryos, but that like science is coming between like the man and the wife in the sacrament of marriage, which I think I don't have enough theological training to be able to talk to that one. But yeah, it is a concern because you could sort of like, as this technology becomes more mature and more powerful, I could easily see it being shut down either from the right or like a whole bunch of different groups. But yeah, I suppose I don't know what to do about it but maybe just like have as many conversations as we can and just like try and bring as many people on board as we can.
I think one thing I would say, I'm optimistic in part because our society has already accepted IVF. If you go back and look at old scans of like the things people from both secular and religious spaces were saying when they started doing IVF, everyone was freaking out. Everyone was really, really freaking out. I just read very extreme things on the front page of all kinds of newspapers. It's already the case, like, there's no such thing as like non-embryo selection in IVF. What happens is that doctors go, well, that one kind of looks like the most symmetrical. Right, yeah, I think I would, in general, I think it would be good for people who want this to happen to emphasize that. You need some criteria to select the embryo you're going to implant. This is better for both the health of the child. It might be better for success in pregnancy. We don't really have the data on that yet, but I wouldn't be surprised.
And just to add to that, I did talk to someone who was working from genomic prediction, and they did say that the embryos that were polygenically selected seemed to have a higher rate of successful transfers, and maybe it's because they were the process is picking up on health signals that regular IVF is not picking up on.
This sounds like such a rich, amazing topic. Is there a conference coming up that
Funny, you should ask. So the Reproductive Frontiers Conference will be at Lighthaven from the 16th through to the 18th. And so, look, if you want, you could just like hide away in an attic here, stay overnight, and you'd be at a fabulous new conference. But it's going to have all of the great scientists from all over the US will be, and bioethicists will all be here talking about the nitty-gritty of the technical aspects, and as well as debating the philosophical aspects. I'd love to see you guys all there. Just go to reproductivefrontierssummit.org if you want to get a ticket.
So that's Tuesday through Thursday, right? And you can get a day pass, right?
Yes.
And if you're only going to come on which day should you come on?
Come on the Thursday, because there's going to be an amazing after party. And last year, everyone said that the after party in particular had amazing conversations.
Another concern, I guess, that people sometimes bring up when I talk to them about this is like the idea of accelerating evolution and doing so on your own accord, or like you mentioned the trait of courageousness, you want your children to have that. Looking societally, like how do you think it would impact the world if families are able to choose like their children's character traits?
I think this is a really good question, and like with so much about reprogenetics, I think the answer is it's already kind of happening. Like we already have assortative mating, and every one of us, when we select a partner and choose to have children, we are making decisions about what we want the future of the human race to look like. But I realize that's a little bit of a cop-out answer, because of the whole point of this technology is that it's that, but a more powerful version. And so I think the answer is that it's going to be really interesting. I think we're going to get a lot of competing ideas of the good, and perhaps we might get speciation eventually in several hundred years. Who's to say what's going to happen? Although I think that there's more overlap between people and like what the good is, and there are edge cases, but there's more overlap than perhaps we sometimes think. Like I think pretty much everyone in this room ideally would like their child to not have a heritable disease and to be generally healthy and, be reasonably tall but not too tall. Courage is generally considered a good thing. Wisdom, if you can get it. But yeah, I think that the future is going to be strange.
Yeah, quick question. So, I know a lot of the genotype, phenotype data sets, like, UK Biobank, some of the other ones, are very locked down because certain political elements are afraid of what might be if they were not so locked down. So I'm curious what this means for embryo selection, and basically where do we get the raw data to make the models that we can know which embryo is the right one?
Yeah, and so a lot of the biobanks do make it quite difficult for people to access the data, and then there are some data sets which we know exist, but none of the embryo companies currently have access to, like the Million Veterans Project. And then there are a bunch of different data sets that are all over the world. I think Iran has one. I know that there's the Taiwanese data bank. And so if we could kind of consolidate all those in one place, it would be great, because it means that people of different ethnicities would have access to equally powerful predictors. At the moment, the predictors are slightly better if you've got majority European ancestry, just because most of the data that is readily available comes from the UK. But I think a couple of the polygenic embryo selection companies have recently got access to the Taiwanese data bank, and so that's great for people with Han ancestry. But yeah, I think it would be great if the data was more available. I'm not really sure how to make it available. It seems like that would basically be a political project, unless somebody wants to fund sort of genome heists around the world of
Legal genome heists, of course. Here's a quick question for the room. Who here would let their genome be sequenced and take an IQ test for science? Yeah, so we're definitely, I think that the Berkeley Genomics Project, which runs Reproductive Frontiers, would be interested in funding to support that kind of effort. I think people who want this kind of thing to advance should consider giving them money. And yeah, maybe at this next year at Manifest, maybe you'll be able to sign up.
Spit in the tube to defeat the artificial general intelligence.
What if we already have this data? Can we just give it?
Interesting. I mean, if you want to talk afterwards, that sounds amazing. Hell yeah.
Does CNY work directly with Parasite, or do you have to do it?
So they work with a company called Cooper Genomics who does their actual sequencing. And so the answer is you have to go to Cooper and say, I would like to request the raw data, and then Cooper get annoyed at you, and then they are supposed to give it to you in a month, and then it takes 2 months. So the answer is you can get it. It takes longer than it should. I'm currently talking with the CEO of Parasite because I have a Signal group chat full of women who want to use CNY and Parasite together, and I'm like, hey, look, we've got all these people. Can you just do the sequencing directly with Parasite? He said yes. The head of his lab is dragging her feet and doesn't want to do it because I think it's a whole lot of extra work. So the answer is yes, it's currently possible. Hopefully, it'll be easier in the next couple of years.
One thing that's worth mentioning on that front is you should be careful who you work with. So like Cooper is fine, they will give you your genetics, but some of the companies have refused to do it, which is definitely a HIPAA violation, and they will lose the lawsuits that are impending against them. But some companies are just like, no, we think that's weird. It's completely illegal, both in the EU and the US. They have to give you your data if you ask for it, but just check with people in the know. The companies will know everything, but we just know a couple people who are have been tied up by that.
The major company to avoid is Juno. So ask your IVF clinic, and if they say we use Juno, do not go with that IVF clinic.
What is the biggest holdup right now in terms of getting data? Because obviously, super cool idea. We could probably just assume the mean IQ is here, a standard deviation above. But without doing that, what do we need to do to go get a bunch of data? Could you just talk to Claude and Claude assigns IQ and you spin a tube and call it a day? Or how many samples do we need to get beyond 20% variance explanation?
That's actually a really good question of how many samples we need. It's something I would say I would go talk to Fable about that, but I think I've missed the boat on that one. But I think the answer is just that there's not really a institutional academic funding for it. If you went to a university or people who fund university grants or to the NHS and said I want to fund a massive phenotype genotype data set, as DC was talking about before, that can be politically fraught, and so they're why would you want to know things? And you're for science reasons. And then when it comes to getting funding from outside of academia, I don't know if there's up to this point, it has made sense from a cost perspective, although I think that is changing. The fact that the new Illumina machines are able to do really cheap genotyping means that it might even be possible to do it in you probably wouldn't make a huge amount of money, but it seems like the economic proposition of going out, interviewing people, genotyping them might make sense. But yeah, I think the project just needs funding, I guess.
But because I don't know enough about bio, so you tell me, is there anything in the reprotech that you're seeing that would be useful for already born people? Can you use any of the data to say, hey, what about modifying the genes of existing?
Yeah. I think sadly there's not much you can't change. You get your predictors and there's not really much you can do about it, but I still think it's really helpful for planning. I think if I did my genotype and found out that I was at a very high risk of Alzheimer's, I would want to go and try and do the things that I can to prevent that, and I would probably bump up my timelines in terms of being here's how many good years I have left. So it's helpful for planning, but that's apart from planning, it's not that helpful, sadly.
I do think there are some really interesting things. This is a minor instance, but there's a fair amount of genetics data out there. If you have a deep read, even just the AI can tell you a fair bit about it. One thing that I as a kid had some small mysterious scarring whose origins I had no idea of, and I'd always just been in the back of my head as this is a weird, slightly freaky thing that I remember from my childhood and have this very faint mark. And it turns out it's like a known skin condition that just happens sometimes that has like a genetic correlation. So I can stop, worrying about mysterious dark past you can't remember or anything like that. So there are things out there of this effect. There's like a lot of stuff about like caffeine metabolism and a bunch of other things. Also, what drugs or like forms of anesthesia you might not be responsive to, and also the number of things we know are just going to come up as the increase as the models get better. So, who knows? You'll find out something interesting for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. That's true of like screening seems like a great idea. And if you're like, oh, I'm at really increased risk for bowel cancer, maybe I start doing screenings for that at the age of 40 as opposed to 50. So I suppose, for planning purposes, it's great. I wish I had my laptop in front of me so I could give you the actual list. But if you want to go to herosite.com, they will be able to tell you sort of the things that they can predict. But it's a lot of different types of cancers. So I think like skin cancer, thyroid cancer, Alzheimer's, schizophrenia, bipolar, various, I think, can you remember any of the other ones off the top of your head, babe? Oh, yeah, I think there was an ADHD one. My general view is that I think these predictors are great if you have like a really outsized risk of any of them. Although it's interesting because like if you look at the history of like biomedical science, basically every cancer has like come a long way in terms of survival rates over the past 20 to 30 years. Like I have an uncle who was diagnosed at the age of 40 with aggressive metastatic skin cancer, and he died within, I think, 6 weeks. And now I think that his cancer is basically curable. Like a new drug came out recently that it's just like, this is no longer a death sentence. And there are so many stories about that. So by the time our children are at the stage where they're going to be thinking about getting these diseases, my hope is that a lot of this stuff will be less relevant than it is now. The exception to that is that we've made very little progress when it comes to basically anything to do with the brain. Like our treatments for Alzheimer's or bipolar or schizophrenia really haven't gotten a lot better. And so those were the ones that we were mostly concerned about, is that we think that it'll still be a major problem when our kids are older.
One thing that I was very pleased to hear in learning about this whole process is that it looks like a lot of the genes that correlate with IQ correlate because they are drivers of general brain health. So it's not the case that you're automatically selecting for someone with like a super spiky form of cognition. You're not like likely to get a savant. In fact, you're more likely to get, it might be one of the reasons like the early signs for our pregnancy are like very, very good, and this is maybe something that's come up before. It's hard to be smart if you don't have a healthy brain, and it's also useful to have a relatively healthy body. So by selecting for IQ, you're not just selecting for, like math smarts. You are probably helping to select for a brain that is capable of whatever people end up trying to put it towards.
The good news on that is like as far as I've looked into it, is that a lot of the early studies into this, it looks like it was selection effects. So people who are generally more unhealthy are more likely to have to do IVF in order to get pregnant. And then when you look at populations who are doing IVF for non-infertility related reasons, so even before polygenic embryo screening became a thing, you could do something called PGTM, which is basically a test looking for monogenic diseases. And so you will do this, say, if you and your partner both are carriers for Tay-Sachs or for cystic fibrosis, you will do IVF and then select the embryos that are not affected by the disease. And in that population, it seems like their children are as healthy as conventional children.
I don't know if you covered this earlier, but you did mention it briefly in an answer to a different question, which is, could you, both of you speak on how you see this playing out, or what the sort of trade-offs will be if and when parents select for things that are not in the best sort of interest or health or longevity of the people, but are instead related to things that are just related to that, like height is an example where you can go higher, but that's actually detracting from the lifespan of the individual.
Yeah. For those of you that don't know, being extremely tall is not good for longevity. And I think, in fact, for men, the optimal height for longevity is something like 5'9". And so, which, yeah, it's shorter than you think.
If you discount like the benefits you get socially or whatever.
Yes. And so, like I said before, that I think that most people, I think, agree more closely on the good than we sometimes make out. Like, we all think that courage is good, kindness is good, but there are definitely going to be niche cases. And so there are definitely... I think in the deaf community, there are some people who are like, well, deafness isn't a disability, it's actually a way of being, and it's a culture. And so there's a question of, are you going to get families selecting for deafness and having deaf children? And sort of, I don't know, I think I'm sort of temperamentally libertarian, and so oftentimes I'm like, we should allow people to make their own decisions. But it does... like, it disturbed me a little bit. I'm like, oh man, what if the kid decides that it doesn't want to be deaf? That would be absolutely terrible. And so these are the kind of questions that we're going to be discussing at the Reproductive Frontiers conference that you guys should all come to, because there is going to be some fraught bioethical questions, basically.
Along a similar line, my perspective on this is like, yes, people will do bad things with the technology. People do bad things with technology. It's part of the natural process of kind of expanding what humans are capable of. I try and use the internet for good things, like meeting my wife and many lovely friends and so on and so forth. She slid into my DMs on Twitter. So really it was her using the internet for good things. But yeah, I think people will do bad things with that. I think that our public trust and process of governance has decayed to the point where you just will not really get good outcomes. Like, we will not collectively come to some wise decision we all agree on. I think that ship has sailed probably a long time ago. And so I think it really is worth grappling with as like you and your friends, your community. I think you should have like extended moral discourse through things like the Reproductive Frontiers Conference and the other people in this space to be like, what do we think the unwise applications could be? And really spend time trying to build consensus with the people you can actually have consensus with. I don't think we're going to have consensus with most people, and we just have to try to make the wisest decisions we can. And as with any technology, you all, I'm sure, have spent a lot of time on the internet. It is a place of wonder and horror. I say that a little jokingly, but just to because we're talking about kids' lives, it's also like, I know a lot of people who've had like depression or all kinds of societal problems, just driven by the internet, and who have found love and found careers and found community. So I think technology is a kind of extended natural environment for humanity, and like it is changing, and we have to try and surf that change as best as we can. So that's kind of my perspective on like, yes, people will do unfortunate things with it. Setting a good example and like putting the data out there and helping to kind of set standards in a pro-social way is, I think, just the best thing you can do.
And just one of the reasons that we wanted to do the conference is to, have these conversations before something terrible happens. Because I think it would be terrible if, a child is born and they're extremely unhappy with the decisions that their parents have made, and then retroactively you're looking for legislation. It's like, can we have those conversations beforehand? The guy who's running the summit, Zvi, I think has come up with, a reasonably common sense suggestion for legislators, is that maybe it should be illegal to remove the child's ability to basically tell you about how they feel. That seems like a basic thing to have in place, to be like, they should be able to complain if they're unhappy with how things turned out. And you're like, okay, maybe we need even more than that, but that seems like a good baseline.
Well, if the standard is that children are not upset with their parents about something,
Yeah,
I
look.
don't know that that's ever going to
Yeah. No, that's very fair.
How do you think about navigating like your expectations of having a super
Yeah, I think that I knew that like any child that I had, I would just love unconditionally and basically think that they're perfect. And so I was like, okay, before they come into the world, I should try my best to try and like, you know, make sure that they have the best patrimony possible in terms of like their environment, but also in terms of their genes. But once they're here, you just gotta, you know, like they're going to be perfect in my eyes, and you know, you'll love them like any other kid.
If the baby doesn't levitate and have glowing eyes, I'm going to ask for my money back. I personally, we joke that I am going to handle the memes and Rachel is handling the genes, but I probably believe in heritability more than like the average person, but less than most people in this room. So I think it's like, and I think even if someone has an extreme amount of firepower, like you think you can obviously mold intelligence to different, like there's just an enormous amount of responsibility still on the parent. I also think that intelligence is something that we kind of carry out socially. Like, you know, here we are at Manifest in an environment that is much better than most environments for sharing ideas and thoughts with each other. It's just like, it's not the case that even if someone that does not have glowing eyes and is not the Cosette's Hatterack themselves, that they, no, like, it really doesn't mean that they're, like, don't just process their value individually, I guess. But I think things will be good. And I think that the babies will be courageous. I think there's signs we don't need to select too much for that by itself.
So at this stage, there are a number of companies offering polygenic scoring. So would you say that any of them have like particular strengths, or like, how do you think about choosing between them?
Yeah, so we went with Heresight because they seemed to have the best intelligence predictor, basically. Although it sounds like Genomic Prediction have said that they potentially have one that's as good, although I don't think they actually offer it commercially, mostly because it's a controversial subject area. It seems like Nucleus Genomics is another one, although I have sort of heard rumblings on Twitter that might be some issues with their predictors, but we will see. I think something that perhaps this industry needs is a body that can do independent verification of the different predictors, because at the moment the problem is like, the company will say, oh, we can predict it this well, and you go, great, can we look at the internals of your predictor? And they say, well, no, that's proprietary, which is totally fair because it's the moat they have commercially, but it would be great if it could be independently verified.
And you could, as I understand it, build a validation data set that would let you do verification without exposing the proprietary information. So I think that the field, especially on the political risk front, like the field and the supporters of the field should absolutely spend money on both actually being responsible and showing other people that we're being responsible by doing things like having independent verification so that people are not essentially getting scammed.
Well, what's the time? If there are no more... excellent. Well, if there are no more questions, I think I might release you guys from your bonds early. But thank you so much for coming to the talk.